Hey guys, Tyler2K here. Today we're going to do a little bit of speculation on the V1.05 patch, aka the June patch that's coming out later this month. At the end of the month, they are holding, a CEO, which is a master event. And looking at the calendar, I believe it's the 28th through 29th or 30th. So maybe they'll drop it after the after CEO concludes, in which case technically it'll still be out on June. Maybe that's what they'll do. I don't know, but I can't see them dropping a major balance patch before the 30th. So, for people who are familiar with my channel or may not be familiar with my channel, you might know that I typically do a full patch breakdown where we go over the game mechanics and things that are changing, some speculation and whatnot. For this latest V1.04 patch, I was in Japan, so I didn't have any access to any real editing software, nor my computer was very bad. I had like a year-old laptop which ran the game at 520p, minimal quality, and it was very, very poor. And I figured you guys wouldn't want to see that. But instead, we're going to go ahead and get ahead of the curve and, like I said, talk about what I believe will be in V1.05. So for the most part, this will be off the dome. It's things that I've been thinking about for a while now regarding game balance and how they're going to balance it going forward. So I might go a little rambly. I probably will edit this, so I'll put some clips here. That way you have better examples of what I'm talking about. That way I don't ramble so much. So just bear with me that I might, do some interjections like, hey, editor here. I completely messed up on something. I'll correct myself after the fact. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. So in case you don't know, for V1.04, they patched quite a lot of parts of the game, but there were some noteworthy characters who just basically slipped through the cracks. So as you see here, for Victors with no adjustments, e.g. Victor, characters, I say Victor, Lili, King, Paul, Yoshimitsu, they are going to get patched in the future. Whether that means buffs or nerfs, it's really hard to say. You might have your own opinion, and I likely will have my opinion. I'll give you my opinion in just a second here. But for the most part, I don't think there's going to be two major changes. We're not going to see something crazy like Paul has a 5-frame unblockable or something crazy like that. What we're likely going to see is a culmination of the 1.04 and the 1.05 patch together. So we might see some tracking changes for them, maybe guard breaker states and stuff like that. And we'll talk about that. Actually, you know what? Right now. Okay, so Victor, if I was to predict what they're going to do with Victor, I would imagine Victor is going to get slightly buffed. But the major culprit that I'm sure a lot of players don't really like, especially in the current meta, is running 2. If I was to take a guess, Victor's running 2 is going to get nerfed, very similar to how Dragunov and Azucena's running attacks got nerfed, respectively. So Azucena went from +5 to +2, and Dragunov went from +6 to +4. So significantly big frame disadvantages for them. They still get plus frames and they still do chip damage. And speaking of which, actually their chip damage was also adjusted. So I believe Victor's chip damage at the bare minimum will definitely be adjusted. Almost certainly going to do 2 fewer points of chip, which probably means it's going to go from something like 6 points of damage to now 4 points of damage. Also, I don't think you can really nerf Victor's frame advantage on the move itself. Simply because he doesn't really have much of a strong counter at game outside of 15. So as soon as you start tinkering with that +5 and make it worse, EG would, I think they'll probably do, and I think they'll probably make it +4, kind of similar to Dragunov. Then he kind of starts getting hit really hard because not only can you power crush through, but now simple jab checks will keep him in line to beat his quickest counter tool of 1+2 by itself. So I wouldn't doubt it if that's what we're going to see for Victor when it comes to nerfs. And let me start with by talking nerfs. So +5 to +4 on block, and it will now do 2 less points of chip damage on block, therefore making it that Victor will be forced to go for his ground game, his low game, rather than just do natural chip damage post-heat engager, because at the end of the day, that's the real culprit here, right? You're left into a +17 situation, and characters like Azucena, Victor, Dragunov can just chip you out without any sort of counterplay literally possible, right? Because Dragunov's running 2 at its quickest is 18. So a 1-frame window. You literally have no frames to do anything post heat engager. So it's true for those 3 characters. A few other characters have more proper counterplay. At the bare minimum, I can see Victor losing running 2. Another nerf I can probably see Victor getting is either down back 4 will be less advantageous, which would really hurt, but I can see them doing it probably from +4 to +3. I can also see them possibly reducing the damage on a move like Expulsion, aka Heat Mode up 1+2. In case you don't know, Heat up 1+2, which you guys probably are very familiar with, check out the footage on the screen, is a super strong attack. It doesn't track, but it actually kind of has a little bit of a cone to it, simply because the explosion that comes off of it kind of branches out. So it can be tricky to sidestep, although a really experienced player won't have that problem. Although, two issues with Expulsion. The first problem is that it actually does a ton of damage. If you ever play a different character and go into a Heat Burst, Heat Dash Cancel combo, you'll typically do somewhere in the ballpark of like an extra 20 points, 25 points if you're lucky. But a character like Victor with his Expulsion does absurd amount of damage off unscaled. I don't know the exact number, but I would have to imagine it's close to 30. And then furthermore, the really tricky part with Expulsion is because it has the explosion effect on it, it will actually break the walls if there is a breakable wall present, or if you're at a strong breakable wall that has one hit left. So you splat them to the ground, so basically you don't cost a wall hit when you perform it, and then the explosion is what breaks the wall afterwards. So you kind of get this unscaled massive damage burst, and you might have seen combos, and what I'll do, I'll probably find one here to post it. Shoutouts to our Tekken, I'm sure I'll find it there. But yeah, you can cascade your expulsions for a wall break state and keep breaking the walls with essentially unscaled damage. So all of a sudden, even though Victor is not like the strongest combo, he has really good carry, but his combos don't do a lot of damage. As soon as you factor in expulsion, especially with a wall break, all of a sudden his combos are doing absurd amount of damage. So I can see them definitely nerfing those three things. Expulsion is probably the most annoying because of the variance on it, but running 2 almost certainly will be one on the chopping block. Talking about Lili, Lili, as shown in winning Evo Japan, is definitely a force to be reckoned with. I think the real trademark or hallmark of Lili in this game is currently her safety. Of course, she has incredible movement, but also she has incredibly strong, not just crushing options, but she's generally very, very safe. Her new back turn game is very safe relative to what it would be in previous games. Like, for instance, I'll give you a modern day example. So with Raven, you can perform a back turn down 4, which is a very big part of his general meta game, right? In previous patches or previous games in general. But now with the generic down 4 off of back turn even, all of a sudden this annoying poking game goes from not super unsafe to incredibly unsafe, such that it's better for Raven to commit to an option like Shadow Forward 4-1 rather than go for a little chip low option like back turn down 4. Little things like that got kind of forgotten by Namco. Great example is Kuma. Kuma lost access to his generic down 4, or his Jack down 4, not even generic one, and now it's a generic down 4, but has all the negatives of the Jack version, but is also now launch punishable and worse frame data too. So Namco clearly forgot a couple things when it came to balance, but at the same time, for a character like Lili, insanely safe off her back turn game, because now instead of having generic options, he has command options, and his command options are now actually safer. Which are really, really strong, especially when you combine it with her new QCF3 steel pedal effect, while she still has her old steel pedals, like Sidestep 3. Yeah, she's incredibly, incredibly safe for what she can do, and also her damage potential is very good. Someone was showing me on stream a very simple combo, down for 2 BT option, BT3-4, back 1, CD3, and then you do an up 3-3 line, and it does like 70-something damage. And I'm thinking, man, that's a lot of damage. Like, before even having to use meter, even doing any sort of reset, and then once you get to the wall, of course, you get the incredibly, incredibly, incredibly nasty Feisty Rabbit mix-up, which almost certainly will also be on the chopping block. Similar to Xiaoyu, Feisty Rabbit is very, very safe for what it does. An option like Feisty 2, if I remember correctly, might be safe. I'd have to look up the frame data. If it's not safe, it might only be like -10 or something, and it's a launcher. Mix that up with her Feisty Low, which at the same time, I believe might be minus 13. I'd have to look up the frame data. Same thing here. But it's the same deal as Xiaoyu. Like, Xiaoyu has access to the Hypnotizer lows. That's only minus 12, and not very many characters actually have a proper 12 presence. We have, Tsunami Kicks, generic option, no, 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 right? Like, well, who has a 12? A Dragunov? Lee, I guess you can argue with wall stand 3 on 10. I don't know, man. Zafina has a brand new wall stand 3 for 11, but like 12 is such an antiquated number in this game. And it's also, to be honest, something that's been going on forever. If you ever played Tekken Tag 2, or even if you haven't, my recommendation is go to a frame data website, look up your character, and see how much more incredibly punishable they are. Everything is more punishable in Tekken Tag 2, which really goes to show you, like, over the course of T7 and T8, how much easier and simpler they made the game by just making everything safer. Like, what good is a 14-frame launcher with Lars and Brian when all the 14 frames are gone? Like, little stuff like that, generic, low options being minus 12, yet still being incredibly strong, even in this current, like, super crazy meta, right? It really, really kind of goes to show you. So I would imagine Feisty Rabbit on the chopping block, probably going to get nerfed, or at the bare minimum, if you don't really want to get rid of the safety part of Feisty Rabbit mix-ups, I can see it costing more meter, such that it acts more like a proper heat smash rather than a heat burst 50-50 force. So kind of similar to how Victor can do 3 expulsions off of heat engager, but only 2 with a heat burst. I can see Lili getting hit by something similar. She'll probably lose maybe 1 Feisty Rabbit. She gets a Feisty plus something else, and then with heat engager, she might get 2 Feisty Rabbits. Keep in mind, similar to Xiaoyu, when you charge Feisty, you're getting meter back. Xiaoyu does her Hypnotizer, you get meter back. Although Xiaoyu did get nerfed, keep in mind, with the latest patch by her losing her generation. So same thing. I can see that happening to Lili. Hey guys, Tyler here doing the editing. When I started working on this video, 1.05 was just talked about, but we didn't have an inkling of what was going to happen in the patch. So for posterity, of course, I made the Twitter note and I said, oh, hey, watch them officially announce the patch now that we're going to be getting towards the end of the month, and they're going to go ahead out of their way and start saying what's in it. Luckily, they didn't give all the patch notes yet. That's actually going to be tomorrow as of the time of this video, or at least where I'm talking right now. And then probably within about 12 hours will be tomorrow for this video. So I'm going to, rather than keep editing this video, I'm going to push it as is. Hopefully you guys understand. I've recorded way too much of this just to scrap it right now, and there's a good chance part of it will be incorrect or kind of not necessarily outdated, but not correct for 1.05. Now, that's not to say, someone from Namco won't see this and agree with me for the future, but part of the 1.05 stuff will be coming true. Part of it won't be. Most notably, the wall crush mechanic is going the way of the dinosaur, which is thank God, but you'll notice I'll leave the old, currently like Lili wall crush mechanic, which is very oppressive, and I imagine still going to be in the patch because they're going out of their way to nerf heat dash canceling with wall crush and not wall crushes themselves. So please note from here on, everything you're going to hear is going to be unedited. It's going to be very cut and dry, not very many examples except for stuff I've recorded, because I don't typically do this completely linearly. I do it all over the place, but I tend to do it linear-ish. So hopefully you enjoy the rest of it. If not, thanks for coming by. Okay, King is in a weird place because there's a few things on him that are very overtuned, and at the same time there are a few things that are very, very poorly designed. And I think the main reason for King is that they've been kind of forcing this playstyle down your neck. So I know you guys love hearing me talk about old school Dragunov, but in T6 and not Tekken Tag 2, but like T7, they really, meaning Namco, really, really, really wanted you to play Dragunov a specific way. And if you didn't play him that way, they essentially went out of their way to nerf you. So kind of similar to Leroy, where his nerfs affected just a few key moves but left other things untouched. The same thing essentially happened to Dragunov. Like, if you're not playing Namco's way of how to play this character, they don't want you to play the character that way. So after this, I think version 1.03 buff, where King has his Jaguar run, technically called Jaguar Sprint, but there's a stance called JGS. LOL, shoutouts to Namco. So they nerfed or they buffed his JGR such that he can cancel it. Him and Lars both essentially got safer options of their stance mix-up. So Lars DE3 can no longer be heat bursted or rage arted off of an option like SE1, which is cool because SE1's a launcher. So that was great design balance too, by the way. But yeah, in the same vein, that's what happened to King. So they really, really, really want you to play a particular way, and almost certainly that particular way is essentially just using Jaguar Run. That's all they want you to do. So I can see them kind of changing their ways. I don't think they'll go out of their way to make something like Jaguar 4, the low kick, be stagger launch, or make it such that the Jaguar 3, the Sabat, is worse on block. Although I can see them making it such that Jaguar or JGR 1 is either punishable or more punishable. So as of right now, it kind of sets up, wall stand 2 traps, wall stand full crouch 2 traps, which actually got buffed in 1.04 because you no longer have the high crush bug where if they whiff over your head, you can't do a full crouch option. So heavily, heavily favors characters like Reyna and King, who have like these full crouch bufferable mashing now, high crush launchers, which is incredible game balance, especially because King already has wall stand 2-2, which jab crushes. So the shout outs. So I can see them making it such that Jaguar, JGR 1 is now worse to get rid of like this kind of weird forced meta play, especially because JGR 1 already causes a flop state, which then guarantees the people's elbow, which then guarantees all the kick, and then go down the line. And you're basically forced to play the character in a particular way because risk versus reward is so in this favor that it's essentially not balanced whatsoever. So, especially because considering, I think JGR 1 with heat mode is a natural launcher too, or maybe it's countered only. I don't know. Either way, JGR 1 is incredibly, incredibly overtuned. Speaking of incredibly overtuned, we have to talk about back 3, back 4. I'm sure everyone's favorite options. Back 3 is the one that guarantees the 1+2, the little booty bump, whatever you want to call it, the face plant, and then back 4 is the one that's caused airborne spin. Both of them fairly safe and very, very strong. Although the problem, in my opinion, with options like back 3, kind of similar to JGR 1, is that back 3, 1+2, freezes the game in the sense how King is the first to recover, but he's also the first to recover like unnaturally. There's like a lag time between the animation and your character recovering, and I don't necessarily want to single out King here. Devil Jin is a great example of this. He has airborne attack throws, but he doesn't actually have to finish the strings, and then you're still frozen on the floor, and you're like, okay, this is cool. Why am I getting penalized for some janky-ass animation? I have a feeling things like back 3, 1+2 will get nerfed. It will speed up the game. It won't look as horrible. In the grand scheme of things, the frame data might still be similar for King afterwards, but it's just so awkward to get stuck in these like attack throw states where you're just like on the floor like, okay, cool. I guess I'll wait half a second until I can recover, even though nothing's happening on the screen. I don't know. It's kind of disruptive. Also, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth when it comes to like meta play and the fact that they recover so much quicker. Again, I don't necessarily want to sell out King. I'm just holding him out right now simply because we're on the King section. So, yeah, I can see JGR 1 getting nerfed. I highly doubt they'll ever nerf JGR Run cancel. That's probably here to stay. I can see them nerfing, Lars DE3 again, bring it back to the old form. That I can definitely see happening. But it's weird that, King, for the most part, has like a lot of safety to him. And a couple of little janky parts as well. Other than that, I can, considering the fact that they talk about throws as part of the balance here, I can see Blue Spark throws getting nerfed. So correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I've heard. So Blue Spark throws for King and maybe a few other characters are essentially faster versions of the attack, but they are also harder to break. And I don't know if that's necessarily a result of the 18 frame versus a 20 frame window, or if it's because the animations are also just faster in general. So rather than it being like a 10 frame buffer and then an 18 frame window, maybe it's like a 5 frame buffer and then a 18 frame window. I don't know. There's some weird combination of the two, but especially online situations, and obviously this game is definitely being bounced around online. It's weird that that is so. It's really, I wouldn't necessarily call it oppressive, but it's a very, very, very strong, nigh oppressive. Because not only do you get the damage buff, you get the speed buff, but then also it's harder to break. So kind of similar to counter throws being nerfed. I can see his not his counter throw game, but the JF throw game, the Blue Spark throw game getting nerfed. I think the damage buff and the speed buff is plenty necessary. You don't need to add in the less window to break it to. I might be completely wrong here, but yeah, I think that's for sure overkill. Okay, now Paul's in kind of a weird spot where he isn't super strong, and for some reason, certain content creators put him like bottom tier, which is crazy to me. But he definitely has a few things that are very, very OP and or overtuned. I wouldn't call him oppressive simply because Paul has always been like a kind of crazy kid like that. So I wouldn't necessarily call it oppressive, but a few things clearly need to get nerfed. The first one that comes to mind is his down forward 1+3 throw. Down forward 1+3 throw in prior games used to, and sorry, by prior games, I mean before Tekken 7. I think actually technically in Tekken 7, early T7, it were still required the just frame, but by Season 3, same thing, Paul, please correct me, by Season 3 they got rid of the just frame requirement, but in older games, down forward 1+3 was his snatch throw, and then you do Death Fist after, so you'd actually input the Death Fist, you do the QCF2 input, but in Tekken Tag 2 and probably T6 and before, it required you to hit the Just Frame Death Fist in order to hit the opponent. Otherwise, they could block it and they can launch you because you missed the throw. You know, Paul's kind of always been a little bit of a joke character, especially after the whole Kuma sagas and stuff like that. He's always had a little bit of joke in him, and at the same time, he's always been technically minded with the JF demo mans and stuff like that. So it makes sense to give him a kind of joke move that's really strong. Even though technically the 1+3 throw is slower to break in older games, it's worse as a command throw anyway, compared to something like 2+4 back. So it makes sense. But ever since like T7 or at least late T7, you no longer need the just frame. So he still has the just frame, but you don't need it to do the guaranteed wall splat and stuff like that. So I don't want to complain about that and say, oh, bring back just frame, because clearly that's never going to happen, so that would be a waste of my breath. But the fact that he can like just frame demo man you across the entire stage is fucking crazy. Like, absolutely insane. You know, I don't know if it's necessarily just heat mode or if a Punisher or if it's with a just frame input or a combination of the three of them. I don't know. But it's absolutely batshit that you get thrown across the stage and it breaks the wall. And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. Says technically, if you do the down forward 1+3, which I think hits on 12, you can use it as a power crush punish. And if the wall's in the proper spot, you essentially get a launcher and there's no counterplay around it, right? Because they went for a power crush and you punished it. So that's crazy. But the fact that you can do this full screen does a lot of damage because it's 2 unscaled hits, right? 2 grounded hits, and then do a combo is really, really, really weird. You know, we'll talk about Jin later. You know what I'm talking about there. But in a similar vein, his low heat smash is really weird that it's so incredibly safe relative to every single other heat smash in the game. So did Namco do that because he's a half joke character? Is he a beginner character? Was that idea, you know, you don't want it to make it too unsafe, but at the same time, a lot of his kit is incredibly unsafe. So it's weird that his heat smash is safe, incredibly safe. And for people who don't know, Paul's heat smash, low, of course, -12 on block. -12, it has its nice little low properties, doesn't have great range, but has decent range. And of course, being a heat smash, you can't low parry it, you can't armor it, blah, 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 right? But yeah, only -12 is nuts. Compare that to Zafina's or who else has a low one? Shaheen, which I think both of them respectively -14. Or compare that to Lee's, Reyna's, Victor's that are all equally launch punishable. Reyna's a 17, Victor's a -15. I think Lee's is also 16 or 17. Why is Paul so incredibly safe? I don't understand that. Absolutely batshit crazy safe for what it does, and that's really cool because when you consider the fact that under heat mode, his demo man his death fist in general is safer and can be heat dash canceled and made like doubly safe and tremendous chip damage. It's really weird to have like a 50-50 part of it that is insanely so safe. Now, with that being said, they're not going to make it 15. There's no shot they're going to make the low 15. If I was to take a guess, it's probably going to be 14. You know how I talked about no one has 14 frame launchers anymore because all the 14 frames are gone anyway. Okay, so Brian and Lars get to launch it. Cool. Okay, and finally we have Yoshimitsu. Yoshi has gotten significant nerfs. I don't believe anyone would ever like defend a pre-nerf Yoshi. Pre-nerf Yoshi was highly overtuned. His flash game was insane. With that being said, the health regen on Yoshi is crazy. So in this game, there is gray health. There's recoverable health. So as you take damage, assuming it's a combo and not like complete standing damage, in which case you get no recoverable health. But as you get damage, you get recoverable health, and as you punch the opponent, whether it be blocked or hit, you get that health back. But you do eventually hit a cap. Yoshi is weird because not only can he gain health back that's beyond the recoverable gauge via NSS, in which case he typically only gets a little bit health back, although it is health back no other character can get health back. But the problem is that under the effects of heat mode, his health, this recoverable NSS variation of all these moves, just become all the time, which is really frustrating. Because he has a mechanic that other characters just don't have an access to, and that is extra recoverable health. That's not even counting the meditation sit. That's not even counting the taunt turnaround. That's not counting the flash taunt turnaround where he gets a bonus health as well. The fact that he can get like during normal combos, not even like normal, like actual optimized combos, he's doing like a bigger damage swing than other characters have. So while his damage, which is good, let's say he's doing 70 damage, right? He's doing 70 damage. Other characters are doing like 75, maybe 80 if the moons align or something, right? So he's doing like 70 damage. That's not considering the fact that while he's comboing you, he's regenerating for like 10 health. So all of a sudden, that 70 damage combo, which is right above average, is also essentially doing 80 damage of a swing, is absolutely batshit, especially because in this game, you're able to get below rage, get above rage, and then also have the benefits of rage, whether it be the bonus damage, the rage art, and then the access to the gut system, which I'll talk about later. Please remind me, even though I'm recording this. He has access to guts. Okay, really cool. So I would like to see them get rid of get rid of the bonus health regeneration and just maybe double the gray life gen. So in essence, it's essentially the same thing, right? He's still doing 80 damage on a swing, right? He's doing 70 plus 10 recoverable, but he isn't getting more health than he should have access to. So I'm sure some Yoshis are going to be pissed off as I say this, but it's absolutely absurd that he does a lot of damage and he also gets more health back that other characters just don't have access to. It is crazy. So I wouldn't mind seeing, again, double the recoverable gauge when he is in heat mode or NSS. That way, you don't have to calculate around health that shouldn't exist, if that makes sense. Very frustrating. Speaking of which, I have to give a shout out. I don't necessarily say nerf 1-1, but 1-1 is very strong, and then same thing. NSS, under effects of heat mode, it's a launcher. At the bare minimum, it's a counter launcher. I don't know why he has that. That's really strong. I don't think they're going to nerf that anytime soon, but I can definitely see them nerfing that 1-1. I think the recoverable health and NSS Flash are way worse. Speaking of NSS, I don't know why we don't see this more often, but he has access to Full Crouch 3 out of NSS, and he's always had this. But for some reason, in Tekken 8, they made it such that it doesn't require clean range which is really frustrating because NSS Full Crouch 3 hits like fucking range 2.5. Like he could be standing in a different state than you, and he can launch you, and you're like, how the hell did he just launch me that far? Like I'm gonna research after this, but I have played against plenty of Yoshis. They drop NSS, they do a buffered full crouch input. You can't see it; it's completely invisible in this game, right? And then all of a sudden, I get launched at like range 3. Okay, you might say to yourself, "Oh, Tyler, just duck." Okay, yeah, sure. If I fucking am a god, right? Okay, yeah, I'm gonna duck every single time at fucking range 3. That's not even talking about like the natural close range mix up between full crouch 3 and up forward 3, which this has always done this. It jab crushes and it low crushes, and it's only minus 13, and also it has a pretty fucking gigantic hitbox on it. Why? Though I can't believe that never got nerfed. I still don't understand why that didn't get nerfed. And people to this day are still like realizing how strong up forward 3 is. And it's kind of like, yeah, this is kind of a fucked up move. Yeah, it is, because he has generic down forward 2 to complement the access to up forward 3. So yeah, I'll post the footage here of NSS Full Crouch 3 hitting at tip range. And I'm sure like 75% of you have never seen that. And you're going to be like, I didn't know he could do that. Yes, he can. And you're going to die for it. Good luck. Crazy. Of course, it does a stand spin state, but still, who cares? Absolutely absurd range, completely invisible. And it, like, I don't know why it hits so far. I just don't understand that. Okay, so those are the nerfs. And of course, I don't want to be someone who's just negative asking for nerfs here. So let's talk buffs. So we'll go through the list one more time. Okay, so the problem with Victor, and of course, I have the most experience here with Victor. The other characters, I'll try my best to kind of complement what I think ultimately they have some problems with. But with Victor is his tracking. His tracking is absolutely abysmal. And at the same time, he has this problem where he has no frames to enforce many things. So oftentimes what will happen is people will get caught up at like small negative. They'll respect him a little bit too much, and then they'll just get blown up because they give up their turn, and then it allows him to gain access to these faster and faster or plus frame attacks, which then he's able to trounce you. So his tracking is abysmal. Up forward 2 is abysmal for how slow it is. Back 4 is especially bad because other characters have faster versions of his back 4, but for some reason either have more range or are significantly faster than his back 4. So if I remember correctly, back 4 with Victor, I want to say, God, I feel so bad because like I used to play a lot of Victor. I want to say it's 16 or 17, and or maybe it's worse than that. Maybe it's 18. It might actually be 18, because I think what happens is with Victor you do 1-1-2, which is a great 10 frame Punisher, but not the best frame advantage plus 3. You do a 1-1-2 and you try to lock him down and you do a back 4, but because it hits on 18 and you're plus 3, that means it hits on 15. But that's a problem, because if they do a hop kick or a down forward 2, they trade, and your back 4 is completely antiquated in an instant. So if back 4 was even like 1 frame quicker, it would better complement his kit. With that being said, I know there's Victor players out there who, or someone just thinking of it now that I mentioned it, there's a problem. And the problem is back 4, just like up forward 2, does not cause a strong aerial tailspin state. So even if it was 1 frame quicker, you can't actually launch the opponent because you can't pick them up because they're not in a strong aerial spin state. Okay, there's obviously big implications of buffing back 4. That would give him access to back 4 Rage Art, which would buff his damage. Victor's damage outside of heat is, I would say, a little bit below average unless there's a wall in play. Like I said, he has great carry. I don't want to make excuses. But without a wall, it's about a little under average. Having access to a back 4 into Rage Art would definitely push him to that above average point, right? But of course, with Heat Mode, he has access to Heat Burst, Heat Dash combo, which does really, really, really good damage. So no surprise there. But yeah, up forward 2, up 2, up back 2, and back 4, yeah, are a little bit slow for what they do, and it's weird that there is no counter property. I don't know. I don't really have a great solution. I would say at the bare minimum regarding back 4, it should at least be 1 frame quicker. Even if he doesn't get anything afterwards, okay, maybe he gets Oki. I don't know. I don't have a good solution, but as it currently stands, unless you were to buff 1-1-2 to be better plus frames, which almost certainly will not happen, back 4 needs a revamp because A lot of times people will duck, think you're going to go low. They see this super obvious low go above their head, and they just launch you because there's actually quite a lot of lag on it. So again, making it faster would go a long, long way. Up forward 2, same thing. If it was a little bit faster, it would also be significantly scarier. But without that spin state for airborne states, you basically hit someone airborne and you give up your turn because now you're like trying to panic, try to figure out what you're supposed to do. They recover quicker than you, and okay, you run into problems. I would also like to see back 2 get buffed. Victor's back 2 is probably the worst move in the game. It is a 12 frame high that is technically an attack, although it does 0 damage, which is not great. On counter it, it's plus 14, so what that means is when you have heat mode activated, you can do back 2 into forward 4-1, and then do a heat dash cancel and do the up 1 plus 2. The whole string or the whole combo probably does good damage, about 65, maybe 70 damage. 2 problems. So the first problem is that because it's plus 14, if you're not inside heat mode, forward 4-1 is a heat engager. The second problem is, like I said, back 2 does no damage. So if you hit the opponent with a back 2 counter hit, and now you go for 4-4-1, your 4-4-1 is scaling at 70% incoming damage. So instead of it being like a 40 damage attack, it's now a 20-something damage attack, like low 20-something damage. And you might think to yourself, okay, well, every character has that, right? Let's say Jin, where you at, Jin? Like Jin stand 4 into 1 plus 2. Okay, stand 4 and 1 plus 2 does 70% damage, right? You're not going to complain about Jin, are you? Well, yeah, but Jin stand 4 actually does damage. So the stand 4 is doing counter hit 100% or 110%, and then your follow-up hits do 70. Like I said, Victor's back 2 does no damage, so you're taking this huge inherent risk and then essentially getting nothing after. And because it's an attack, you get counter hit so much when trying to do back 2. It's slow, 12 frames. Again, very similar situation. Oh, I'm slight plus, I'm gonna go for back 2. Okay, in theory it should work, but if they mash out like a 10 frame, chances are they're going to win. Okay, well, you beat Power Crushes, right? Well, no, actually back 2 is not an unblockable, so it doesn't beat Power Crushes. So Power Crushes just beat it, which is cool because you're doing 0 damage to the person doing the Power Crush, right? Okay, well, at least if you're at plus 3, it's safe, right? Well, yes and no. So very similar to Leroy back to his Sabakis. Back 2 for Victor is insanely linear. Very linear, and more importantly, it's a high. Even if you're, let's say plus 6, you know, plus 6, plus 5, something like that. You back 2, they duck jab, they just win because the CS4 property on it. Well, okay, well, that kind of sucks. And if they sidestep, I die. If they counter hit me, I die. And if I hit them, I'm doing 20 damage. Yeah, that's the problem with Victor back 2. So there's a couple of different ways to buff him. Victor's back 2, and I give ideas. It's a little bit too late, I'm sure, for the patch here. But one of these 3 things, I've said this all along on Twitter. If back 2 was an unblockable, it would fix the problem with beating Power Crushes. If back 2 was a mid, it would act more similar to Negan 2+3, which is not super strong, but pretty strong. It leads to a counter launcher in some situations with Negan. And same thing with Victor. If Victor is in a plus 2 situation, e.g. Damic 1-1, plus 2. He has a couple of them. 2-1, I think, is plus 2. Or maybe not. I don't know. No, he doesn't have a 2-1. I'm thinking of a different character. Yeah, there's a few of them, but he could set up something if it was a mid. So that way, if they mash out duck jab, or a stand jab, same thing with Negan. You would take a little bit of damage, but then you'd get a guaranteed launcher afterwards. Okay, that's fine. Or at the bare minimum, if you want to leave it alone, if it just didn't fuck up the scaling, it would be okay. If back 2 was 100, if the forward 4 was 100, and then the 1 was, 4-4-1 was 100, okay, we have a shitty move, but at least we're not getting penalized for using it like we are currently. And by far, back 2, like I said, feel free to argue with me. I can't think of a worse move in the game. It gets you killed so often, and the setup and the traps are very light to use because you can mash out in this game so easily. And I don't want to single out this game per se. Yeah, +2 high. Like what you're supposed to respect +2 at high? No fucking way. Power Crush beats your jabs at +2 or -2, right? Video number 3, top right. So why would you respect it? Very, very bad move. Very, very bad move. Yeah, I shouldn't even. Like I said, I'm doing this off the dome here, and man, back to what a bad move, dude. Horrible, horrible move. And you know what? As I think about it, I don't play the other characters enough to give any real advice as to what can be buffed or what certainly will be buffed. I was going to initially say something, but it's like, yeah, I'm just going to be doing mostly speculation, and I'm sure I'm going to be wrong. So my apologies. If we're playing older games, I'd be like, oh yeah, I know what we can change here and there, but yeah, I don't know what you can necessarily buff without it being insanely overpowered, so I'll kind of leave it at that. My apologies for hyping it up kind of thing. So reading over the top line regarding addressing concerns with, one, characters who are not able to exhibit their unique characteristics, two, characters with disproportionate strong moves, and three, situations where one player dominates attack, I think is mostly referring to version 1.04. Obviously, in version 1.04, they definitely did strengthen certain characteristics of characters, making it so that they're more unique. With that being said, a few of them were kind of, I don't know about necessarily misplaced, but the fact that characters like Asusena were nerfed in certain respects of their game, but buffed in certain respects, such that you're more forced to use an option like Lili, I believe is their ultimate intention. So going back to what I had mentioned regarding King, I think that's what they're going to do from now on. They want the stances themselves to be the character definition, and especially in this game where many more characters have many more stances, or they have hybrid stances, kind of like Kazuya now has a Dragunov style 3-1 pickup. Jin has a few new CDS extensions. Jack has a brand new flex stance, the Gamma House stance. Let's see here. Harong has some new definite extensions, things like, LFS, down 4-3, stuff like that. Lili, they brought back the, what is it called? The Feisty Rabbit stance, now that's actually like a key part of her game. Lars, his old Avalanche stance, which wasn't even a stance, now actually acts more like a stance or combo extension. I believe that was their intention. I don't know how much they can change in 1.05 such that they're going to make the character, or stance heavy or defined as such is kind of weird. Talking about Victor, maybe he'll have a new option. Lili, she might have a new option. King, I think, like I said, they'll go around changing JGR a little bit. Paul, not a stance character, although he does now have a full crouch kind of stance, which you can argue might be acting like one. And Yoshi, same thing. I think usually characters who are not able to exhibit it really is more like buffing the character than nerfing them. So I don't think they'll be touched in that sense, but who knows? Maybe one or two more options per few characters, I can see them happening. So again, I believe this is more in reference to 1.04 than 1.05. With that being said, number 2 is probably something I should talk about. And the first moves that come to mind are definitely Demon Paw style attacks. So these are Mishima 442s, which actually, like, every character of Mishima now has one. And I know people will tend to argue with me. What actually is a Mishima? Is Jin a Mishima? Okay, no, he's a Kazama. Is Reina Mishima? No, because that's not her last name. Little silly stuff like that. But you can't really argue with the fact that every character now has like this super long, advancing, not just heat engager attack, but attack that for some reason seems to have tracking, and because the fact it's a heat engager, essentially leads to a full combo and a lot of damage and whatnot. So I think Demon Paws are on the table to be nerfed in the near future. Whether it is to make them less safe, less pushback, which is personally my kind of way I would balance it. I would just kind of get rid of the pushback because as it stands right now, it pushes you to a range where even though technically they're negative, you can't effectively use the frames, and then it might set up a trap and blah, 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 especially when you're considering Heat Burst and Power Crush options that are very, very strong and really good long-range tools and so on and so forth. Yeah, it pushes you pretty far out. And then, of course, as mentioned, being a heat engager, that means they can be heat dash canceled for full launcher. And other than that, probably everyone's big favorite, which I'll talk about shortly in the next section as well, is just the general tracking. So not only are these moves really safe, really far hitting, heat engager launchers essentially, but then they also have absurd tracking built into them. So I don't know if this is necessarily a problem with the game, which from the last bullet point tends to be the case, or if it's just something that's broken with the demon paws themselves that kind of slipped through the cracks. It's hard to say, and hopefully we'll know sooner than later. Speaking of which, even characters who you'd normally not think of as having demon paws have essentially demon paw style attacks in this game. Great example, Harong with his 444, which same, not quite as egregious as the more classical Mishima demon paws, but same thing, heat engager, big kind of lingering hitbox on it, leads to a full launcher with, heat dash canceling. And probably the one that's slipping through the cracks the most is Brian's QCF 1+2. Brian, for some reason, has not just the safe demon paw to go with it, but also has the elbow properties to make it doubly safe, such that typical counterplay of parries and reversals are even off the table to beat it. And that's not even talking about a move like Brian's down back 1+2, which of course isn't a launcher under any circumstances, but has like a really absurd tracking going to the final point of like lateral movement, and just in general things tend to track way more than they really should, and that will be addressed in the next patch. So final bullet point, in V 1.05, adjustments are planned to alleviate Category 3 and enhance the value of player defense techniques, e.g. incorporating lateral movement strategies and adjustments to the battle systems, such as throws, heat dash, heat burst, etc. And I think that's a really good change. So I don't know how much lateral movement will get buffed, but I want to really reiterate that it's not so much a problem with the game's movement as a problem with the game's moves themselves. I think we're kind of getting into a throw out the baby with the bathwater sort of situation. If we address the main underlying problem of certain moves just having absurd hitboxes and problems and just general tracking, which is a little bit excessive, kind of similar to like a T7 Fang jabs, for some reason tracking now every single move seemingly has this property on it. I think if we address those moves rather than simply buffing lateral movement is probably the better way to go. Is it easier to buff lateral movement, sidestepping, sidewalking, instead of fixing bugged moves? Yeah, but at the same time, seeing as how these, next generation characters like Eddie, Lydia, and whoever comes out afterwards, if you are properly balancing them from like square one, all of a sudden these characters are going to have like, maybe, this completely speculative, I'm not necessarily saying anything I don't know that you guys don't know, but they might have moves that just naturally don't track. And then when you have all these characters with like super strong lateral movement game to complement it, you have a doubly bad effect on those new characters. So again, I think fixing the bugged movement and then going from there, or not bug movement, the bugged moves, and then going from there is way more of a benefit than, again, buffing lateral movement itself. Again, we don't know how much they're buffing it. Okay, maybe it's an extra couple of pixels per step now, which would be significant, but still maybe it's not as big as I'm kind of virtually purporting here. But I would really like them to fix the problem moves, then address the issue immediately by just buffing lateral movement. A great example that is kind of blowing up today on Twitter is Nina Blombaum, her forward 1+2. It hits like every single direction. There's like no proper like counter movement counterplay, and I don't know if it's because the hitbox is so active, if it's just a lateral movement bug in general, like I talked about. But for some reason, the 4+2 just has this massive cone on it. And unless, very similar to Demon Paws, unless you have a just frame step to get around it, you can't actually beat it. Of course, Nina has the worst side of the things because her 4+2 is -14 on block, and Demon Paws are of course safe. But at the same time, if your battle strategy is to essentially pop the meter by just doing forward +2 and heat dash canceling it regardless, you don't really have to worry about it, do you? You just get the major benefit right away. And yeah, I don't want to necessarily single out Nina because a lot of characters have this exact same problem. But Nina has the most egregious example because it has the heat engager built into it. You can even essentially get to her side and or back, and it will still hit you, which honestly has been a problem since T7, right? This is not a new problem with these like weird hurtbox hitbox interactions. Shit, I made a video, I think even in season 3, I'll give a shout out top right corner for those who care, of a similar situation. At the end of the day, it's these moves have bad hitboxes and certain characters have really good hurtboxes. So characters themselves have different stances, different like spherical and cylindrical hurtboxes, and there is not necessarily a direct one-to-one correlation in certain moves or certain actual movement options. So, like for instance, Elisa and I can't remember, was it Kunimitsu? Like during their backdash in Tekken 7, I'll try to find the picture. Hold, I can post it here. Yeah, they're visually at one place, but in the game they're at a different place. Like little desyncs like that are things that shouldn't exist when given ample time to fix things. Like same thing, if your hurtbox, your like let's say you're doing an attack and your hurtbox is getting encroached, your hitbox should not be able to take precedence over their hurtbox that's beating you, right? Then it becomes a question of okay, who touched who first, but I don't think it's probably that difficult to solve. I think ultimately, right, even at like a 1 tick or like 60 tick here on the game engine, it should be okay to probably calculate these really bad, erroneous, weird angle crossover situations. Then to leave it as is and then just buff the lateral options there, you know? I don't know. Now, speaking on battle systems, I think people have gotten used to throws. I believe certain characters' throws, as we talked about with King, are better than others, especially when they have faster options than others. But for the most part, I think people have gotten used to it. With that being said, I would definitely like to see throws be sidesteppable and leave maybe generic throws to be the ones that actually track. In previous games, you could do something called an advancing throw. And an advancing throw is literally what it sounds like. You do a forward plus your throw input. So forward 1 + 3, forward 2 + 4, right? And those throws would come out slower, and then you couldn't sidestep those ones, which would normally be kind of a problem, but in Tekken 7, they are generic throws, so you can always break them with a 1 or a 2. In T8, they got rid of advancing throws, made it such that every throw just tracks in general, you know, still left the generic 1 or 2 break, and for some reason, King is the only character with an advancing throw. Oftentimes, I find myself dealing with like heat smash situations, or sorry, heat burst situations, power crush situations, where if I had an advancing throw, I could beat them, but because I'm not allowed to move forward, I can't actually grab them. And I'll actually talk about this, of course, once we get the heat burst, which is very, very frustrating. But like I said, I've gotten used to it, and I think most players have. With that being said, yeah, if command throws no longer could be fully tracking and left the generic throws as is, I think that's an okay solution to the problem. There are characters who can already circumvent this problem as it is, so it won't affect them, but for everyone else, yeah, I think part of sidestepping throws is one of the bigger skills in this game, and of course, if you make it such that lateral movement is stronger, but then leave throws alone, okay, you kind of have like a problem and a solution built into it, so maybe that's the idea. I don't know, maybe that's their plan. I wouldn't mind seeing it, but I think the Blue Spark throws, especially the ones with like they double dip on the benefits, definitely needs some sort of issue or some sort of resolution to fix them such that, I don't know. Again, I don't have the solution here, but they need something because, yeah, they just completely trounce other characters' options. Even characters who would normally be grapplers in other games are just inferior versions. E.g., Lili and Dragunov come to mind, whereas Jack and King have like this super good throw game. Nina, sorry if I said Lili, and Dragunov's just, they're kind of just there. Don't get me wrong, I'm not asking to buff Nina's or Dragunov's. I think throws in general need to be toned down one way or another. So I'm glad to see they're on the chopping block somewhat. Heat dash cancels, of course, are only accessible when you're in heat mode and you perform a heat engager. At the end of the day, the really big problem with heat dashing isn't the combos and stuff like that. Although a few combos kind of get kind of janky with like Lili triple back to one roots, Jack 442 roots. Although that was nerfed, of course, with this latest patch. The really, really big issue with Heat Dash is just wall crush effect. Like, the fact that you go from like a +5 situation into a +11, +12, or more is crazy. Like, that's not even considering the fact that, like, you're doing, let's say you heat engage +17. Now you do a Heat Dash cancel and the wall's nearby. So if your heat engager wall splatter, you get a launcher anyway. If it didn't wall splat, well, now you get a guaranteed follow-up option. And if you heat dash cancel that move, there's no proper counterplay because there's no frames to interrupt you. So going back to Nina, let's say you heat engage +17. You go for Blom Bomb, which is a power crush, and you'd say, okay, well, you can throw to beat the Blom Bomb, right? Because it's a power crush. At +17, you can't, because that throw is then coming out on frame 29. And I'm sure Blom Bomb is activating on 26 or 25. Just spitballing. I'm sure it activates by like 25, 26. Okay, so there actually is no counterplay, and because she armored on 8, there is no jab counterplay either. Okay, so now I ate the heat dash cancel. So if I ducked, I now am getting, small combo. Like, I don't believe her Blom Bomb guarantees anything other than STFU or Divine Cannon, but a character like, Mishima 442, okay, well, now their 442 heat dash canceled, which had no counterplay because it's +17, all of a sudden turns into a launcher. Okay, well, that's not cool, but if I block it, now I'm at the wall, I have taken chip damage, and I'm -12 again, and he's allowed to get another 50-50 on me? Well, that doesn't seem very fair, does it? And again, this goes back to certain heat engagers just being significantly better for heat dash or options than other characters have. Speaking of which, this is something that I hope gets fixed, but in case you don't know, under the effects of heat mode, rage mode, so once you hit that 43 health, I believe it is in this game. I talked about it in my change video. I'll give a shout out top right corner. I'm sure you've seen it, like 37,000 views or something like that. So when under the effects of rage, you have no official terminology, but what I call a gut system. So a gut system is a 2D mechanic where as you get less and less health, you take less and less damage. So normally in a fighting game, let's say a combo does like 40 damage. Under the effects of guts, it would do like 25 or something like that. So the less health you have, it causes like these magic pixel situations. So in T8, whenever you're under T8 guts, you take reduced chip damage to the point where either you take like 1 or 2 points at most, or you take none. So if your opponent would normally do like a few points of chip under the effects of heat mode, it's now doing either 1 damage or 2 damage if it would normally do, let's say, like 6. But there's a problem. And the problem is with heat dash canceling, you actually circumvent guts mode, which I would imagine is a bug. So certain situations, and maybe I'll go ahead and throw up the footage of me playing Leroy here to show you the exact situation. So even though I am doing chip damage to the opponent, okay, I'm doing like 1 damage at a time, even though I'm doing a lot of damage in a row, and that's like his mechanic, right? His specialty is dealing chip damage. But as soon as you heat dash cancel, and not just with Leroy, with every character in the game, you circumvent guts mode. So what would normally do 5 damage reduced to possibly 2 is now doing an unscaled like 7. And that is something that you might not calculate, and unless you're a super high level player or play all the time, you might not even notice this ever happens. But using Heat Dash, you literally circumvent a mechanic of the game designed to slow the game down. Huh? What is that? Well, who thought that was a good idea? I can see that definitely happening. The wall crush effect and the bug of circumventing guts has to go. They have to go. It's crazy. At least tune down wall crush. Speaking of lack of counterplay, everyone's favorite Heat Burst. I said it week 1, playing this game, in a competitive environment, online, of course, relative to doing Theory Crafty, playing online and stuff like that, Heat Burst is probably the worst mechanic in this game, bar none. The worst mechanic. Heat Burst needs to get nerfed, 100%. For somehow, if you don't know how Heat Burst works, it is a I-16 move, has incredible range, so typically you can't even sidestep it. Sorry, you can't sidestep it, period, because it actually full tracks. But you can't backdash it because it hits very far away. Deals chip damage. It's a generic Power Crush on I-16, which is kind of similar to the generic Tag Assault in Tekken Tag 2, which allowed you to punish things like Asuka and June back 3. You know, you could have like this universal punish, which is really cool. But for people who don't know, the generic one was launch punishable, so you're actually risking a lot to do it. Okay, so now imagine every single character in the game has that, and instead of being launch punishable, is either +1 or +2 on hit. I have no words. Oh yeah, and because it's Power Crush, it Power Crushes on frame 8. And even more egregious is the fact that you are either invulnerable during a few frames, or for some reason there's just a phantom high crushing on that. Certain characters, like who are too tall, Victor comes to mind, you know, talking about Victor, can't challenge certain Heat Burst because you literally go through their head as you try to attack them. And I don't understand. And as mentioned, it's such an integral part of the game that it has to be dealt with. And the fact that you get 1 per round is absolutely fucking crazy. Oh yeah, speaking of which, the craziest part, it has priority over every single move in the game except for Heat Smash and Rage Art. So the move that leads to a certain move and a move that can only be performed when you're almost dead are the only moves that actually beat that move. And this goes back to Bros, right? Technically beating Power Crush, but with the involved frames on the Heat Burst and the ducking and then the evasion, you kind of can't always throw them unless you're right in their hitbox. And as talked about, because their excessive range allows for you to do it at a range where you can't throw them anyway. Okay, that's cool. Okay, so I think that covers the major problems with it. So easy fixes to Heat Burst. 1, get rid of the Power Crush effect or make it even 1 frame later. That would be a tremendous. Get rid of the High Crush, like 2, get rid of the High Crush effect or get rid of the involved frames on certain ones. That would also, same thing, help fix it. 3, the range on it is very crazy and it gives certain characters absurd combo damage because they can link it after their whole normal combo and then still do a full combo afterwards. You know, talking as Victor, without the access to the strong aerial tailspin state, you can't actually do a combo structure like that. You usually have to do a spin into a jab, into a deep dash. But then a character like Dragunov or Fang can then thread in, you know, up 4-3 for Fang, Dragunov for down 4-3 +4, then do the Heat Burst and essentially get an extra like 3-4 points of damage per combo that, again, a character like Victor or many other characters, I don't want to even single out Victor, many other characters don't have access to because they don't have the strong aerial tailspin state, which luckily, again, did get nerfed. Another solution is to just make it slower. Even leaving its property of the PC-8 and having the range, if it was just a little bit slower, it would get rid of some of these excessively long combo potentials that, again, really benefit certain characters more than other characters. Or you can just make it less of a trump card. The fact that it can't be beat by basically anything apart from Heat Smash and Rage Art makes it such that it's such an impressive part of the game that you're forced to deal with it regardless. If they made it reversible, parryable, even power crushable such that it doesn't take precedence over slower power crushes, which tend to be designed to beat faster power crushes, that would be a tremendous fix to the move. Like, literally, there's so many things that you can do with Heat Burst. It's crazy that nothing has been done yet, and honestly, I can't wait to see what they do with it. Now, the final heat mechanic we should talk about, because ultimately, heat engagers themselves are kind of balanced. I know a lot of people still don't like the fact you're forced to go into heat mode and whatnot, but for the most part, they're decently balanced. You can argue with certain things being too strong, but they're okay. Heat smashes, on the other hand, are definitely not okay, because it falls to the same problem that Heat Burst have. Heat smashes are just a trump card that literally beats every single thing in the game, and there is no defensive counterplay for quite a few of them. At the same time, other characters' heat smashes are just, in general, kind of bad. Like, for instance, Nina's heat smash is probably the worst one that can't be immediately sidestepped, simply because if you space it out, you just duck it, and then you launch her, which, to be honest, is honestly kind of how the other ones should be. And then at the same time, certain people's heat smashes are so much more valuable than others that it's really frustrating to play against. Characters like Fang, Harong, all their heat smashes are launchers. Jin is probably the most egregious one with his heat smash. He has two heat smashes, one if there's no wall, one if a wall is in the same country as you, where he can wall splat you from a million miles away. Post footage here, of course, leading to wall smash or the wall crush effect. Frustratingly strong. Characters like what's a good example? Characters like Law's heat smash, where you can backdash it, but if you try to challenge it afterwards, he high crushes you, and then at the same time, it's a natural hit spin launcher. Why certain heat smashes tend to do a million have properties on them, but then you have characters like Lee and Victor whose heat smashes are launch punishable and also don't do anything special if you trade against them incorrectly, is really, really, really strange. And again, this goes to the fact that, let's say you couldn't sidestep them. And let's say this goes to the same effect where for some reason you couldn't sidestep him, so you'd have to challenge him. Again, you can't reverse them, you can't parry them, you can't heat burst them, you can't power crush them generically. It's weird that this mechanic was clearly based on the rage, what is it called now? I can't think what it's called. The rage drive mechanic from T7, but like has no actual similarities to it. Because keep in mind, you can still perform your heat smash, the heat burst, the heat smash, and a rage art in a single round if you really want to. Whereas the old, rage drive took your meter and you're forced into one or the other. You didn't really have a choice there. But in this game, like near zero counterplay unless you play a bad character, let's be honest. No way to beat it normally. If you screw up the punish or this or that, you just die. That's really fun. And then certain of them, again, are so overtuned relative to other characters' undertuned ones. I cannot see them not getting nerfed, especially Jin's Heat Smash 4, especially because he already has another Heat Smash. Did he need a second one that launched you from 20 miles away? I don't understand that, and I can't wait to get that nerfed as well. Now, I'm sure I'm missing something. I'm going to go ahead and edit this, and I'll probably add in an addendum here if I forgot anything. But I am hopeful that the defensive patch will help lighten some problems that are with the game. I do hope, again, that meaning Namco, addresses the problem head on and attacks problem moves rather than just generically tries to fix the game. Because, again, certain characters really get hurt by that. Certain characters get buffed. And then, especially considering the fact that that would mean their DLC is probably going to be worse because of it, might be some interesting decision making and conversations for Namco in the future. So, comments, questions, concerns. If there's anything I clearly missed, please let me know in the comments. If you want to discuss this, please do so. Apart from that, I think that's about it. I hope you guys have a good day. I want to see what you guys think. Later, dudes.